Do we really have to allow ourselves to get to a point where we have nothing left to lose? Or are we willing to, while we still have a chance, while we still have some form of economic strength, to an extent, economic superiority, are we going to take this chance and push for this and have peace and prosperity? Or are we going to allow everything to collapse first into anarchy and suffering before we do anything? Yeah. We have a choice. Mm-hmm. Peace or anarchy?
My guest is Liam Richard May, a young South African political activist and ex-member of the Freedom Front Plus. I think Liam can correct me if I'm wrong. Ex-council member for the Freedom Front Plus in Mbombela. I think it was Nelspruit in the old days. Liam came to my attention a week or so ago when I got news that he's about to embark on a walk of about 1,500 kilometers through the heart of what he calls the originally proposed Volkstaat region. He's going to walk this whole region that they've identified, carrying the flag of the old Transvaal Republic. And his aim is to reignite awareness, inspire unity, and remind the Afrikaner-Boer community that independence and self-governance are still within reach in the country. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I must say, to kick off with, when your image appeared on the screen and I saw the old Transval flag behind you, I thought, that's kind of provocative. And I thought, all my liberal friends are going to chop my head off. A good choice. Tell us about this walk. There's been a walk before. Give us an idea about this current walk that you're planning.
So yeah, as you said, there have been walks before. In all of them, a common factor is the fact that I carry the Forkstart Flag, which is obviously the flag of the old Transval Republic, but it is a symbol of Boer culture, of the history, of faith, and who we are. We use it as an identifying factor. So yeah, with this walk, what really motivated me to do this, I think there's a lot of factors that have led to this point, but I think the last year for me has been one of great turmoil. It's been a very rough time. I've uncovered and learned a lot about the history and what happened in 94, specifically around the move for a Volkstaat by the Volksfront under Constant Viljoen, and then the betrayals, and a part and parcel, that's what led to my expulsion from the Freedom Front Plus political party, as they were a key player in the handling of the Afrikaner Accord back then. But now my entire drive in the last, call it 5 years of my political career, has been focusing on the unity of the Boere in South Africa. There's always that saying that we are fragmented, we never stand together. And yes, there are many groups with differing opinions and people who think differently and act differently, but at root, we are the same. We share the same culture. Ons praat dieselfde taal. We have a rich history, and in the end, we want to achieve the same thing. And so by doing this walk, I hope to sow seeds of unity and hope to just find a way to get our people to stand together under one common goal, one common objective, being our freedom and our independence that we were promised 30 years ago and we have not obtained. And those promises of the Afrikaner Accord still stand on the table. There's things happening. There's movement.
If you say there's movement, just give me an idea of what kind of movement you're talking about, because one of the things that I want to talk about today is, in fact, my viewpoint exactly that we don't see any movement 30 years post-apartheid. Um, Nobody has taken it up in Parliament. Nothing has happened.
So, yeah, with that, nobody's taken it up in Parliament because there was a particular political party that had the mandate and they failed us. They have surrendered their mandate. However, there was an organization by the name of Tabok Trust, which was established 1998, I believe, to continue the push. They are the predecessors of the Volksfront. And in fact, the Volksfront itself as a public entity was just made dormant after the whole fiasco in the 90s and has now been re-registered, or I wouldn't say re-registered, it was always registered, just brought back as a public organization of last year. So the Volksfront is alive. It has been revived. It is the public organization to push for a Volkstaat. On the other hand, Tabok Trust, they have for the last 30 years been doing the necessary research to be able to take this to court. And I sat last week in a meeting with the head of Tabok Trust, a key player in this movement. And I sat with heaps of court dockets in front of me, research papers. And when I look at those and I look at the information inside them, we are ready for a Volkstaat. So what I have been told is that Tbok Trust is ready to take this battle to the courts for our Volkstaat, for recognition. However, the court can declare we're allowed a Volkstaat, but we will not obtain it unless we have a movement amongst the people, unity amongst our people to want to have freedom. So with the knowledge being out there now that things have happened, it would help to wake up the people a little bit more to this reality that, hang on a minute, we are one step away from an independent state. Tabok Trust is ready, but are we ready?
You've now just said we are ready, and you've seen documents that would indicate to you that we are ready. Can you go a little bit deeper into that? What exactly have you seen that we don't know about, or that the Freedom Front Plus, for example, might not know about, or may know about and not take action on, or whatever the case might be? But what have you seen of late that is recent, that is now, that is giving you the feeling, or at least the trust that, I think you use the words, the time is now?
So I can't speak too much about the case. I do not want to jeopardize the case by accidentally saying the wrong thing. But what I can say is what I have seen there. There is no doubt that a court can deny what is there in these papers. They have done years of research in depth to find everything necessary that's needed for this case. And if you ask about the Freedom Front, they know about everything. And I'll refrain from making my comments because they know how I feel about their participation or lack thereof in this process. However, they no longer have a mandate towards the Afrikaner Accord, so they're completely out the picture. The political process is null and void. It is no longer, it has never helped us anywhere, and no politician will be able to give us. It's in our hands now. It's in the hands of the courts. It's in the hands of the people who will it.
You suggested in what you've just told me now that the Volksfront more or less died out some time ago, but am I right to say that it's been reinvented or recreated, that the Volksfront is a re-registered new organization on the horizon, working together with Tabok Trust? And, well, can you tell us more about Tabok Trust, who they are, and perhaps also a little bit more about the Afrikaner Volksfront?
Yeah, so Tabok Trust was registered and first chaired by General Constant Viljoen. And the Tbok Trust came to be as a result of the failings and the betrayal of the politicians who failed to push. You see, when the Afrikaner Accord was pushed, there was a referendum held. There was a whole lot of process. There was a lot of people sat around the table. There's acknowledgements of Nelson Mandela, the National Party and F.W. de Klerk. They all sat around a table and they were like, right, let's talk about this. Constant Viljoen quite literally came there and threatened them and said, "Volkstaat or civil war." That was pretty much his words then, and then they went to negotiate. So Tabok Trust is the entity that has held the mandate now, the sole mandate of the Afrikaner Accord, and they are essentially the legal body that is pushing for the implementation of the Accord and the success of it and the recognition of us globally. So that's as far as I know. There is more information to find online and that. And as for the Volksfront, they were never deregistered. They were only made dormant, and they were never needed after 2000 as you can probably tell by the Volksfront VF, and there's another organization with the VF. The Freedom Front Plus political party was birthed from the Volksfront and to be the political entity, and the Volksfront was then laid to rest because its sole purpose was to fight for Boere Afrikaner independence and autonomy. And of course, that's been put aside and put heavily on the back burner. The triumphs of South Africa in the 90s, the World Cup, and this sense of unity and this rainbow nation ideology changed a lot of the dynamic of how people thought. But here we sit 30 years post-apartheid, and are we really living in this wonderful, glorious rainbow nation that they put forward? Now the people who stopped the process of obtaining a Volkstaat look like a bunch of knobs because honestly they failed us. So the Volksfront is back in action as the public organization for this whole thing.
Yeah. Am I right if I say to you that if I am to get onto a plane now and fly to South Africa and go and spend some time there, that the probability is very, very high that at least 90% of the people that I will encounter, and this is my impressions from here in Europe, will say to you that the idea of a Volkstaat is kind of an illusion in the mind of a couple of crazies on the far right wing. That will be the general perception, not of myself here where I'm sitting in Holland, but that's what my mede-Afrikaners will say to me. That's the impression that I get from every South African visitor that I've had here in the last 10 years.
So yeah, I think the main thing that comes down to it is people believe it to be a pipe dream because they were told it was a pipe dream. For the last 30 years, people have been lied to about the Afrikaner Accord. People have had it hidden away from them. I did not know about the Afrikaner Accord until I started seeking last year, until I started getting into trouble. And believe me, when I started asking all the questions, that's when all the trouble started for me. That's when the politicians started saying to my face, "But there is no such thing. You do not know what you're talking about. Oh, you're chasing ghosts." And then I met with the people who were involved with the process, and I learned the truth. And all you have to do is research and realize that, I had a debate with one of the key players in the Cape Independence movement, and they told me the idea of Volkstaat for the Boere will never happen. He says there's too many processes to achieve. And then I explained to him exactly what processes have already been undergone. And he kept very quiet. And I said to him, we are closer to achieving a Boere Volkstaat than the Cape is to achieving independence. And all people have to do, instead of debating and saying, yeah, but this and that and demographics and populations, and it would never be allowed, people need to do the research into what has already taken place. They need to understand the dynamics and all of that, the agreements that have taken place, all of those things. And also understand that right now, South Africa is in a very terrible spot globally. The world is turning around. That liberation, glorious liberators of 1994, the ANC, are now a basket case in Africa. Everybody looks at them and goes like, right, these guys are terrible. They are barking up the wrong trees, threatening powers that can crush them in a single blow. And oh, guess what? Our neighbor Lesotho has threatened war on us. Look at that. We're an embarrassment to the world. So South Africa is in no position to negotiate with anyone. So that's why it's the right time for us to negotiate for what we want in the country.
I think that if anybody who follows politics in South Africa, even on the surface, are aware of the fact that there was an accord signed in 1994 that gives the Afrikaner essentially the right, if you wish, to self-determination. But we also know, and I think I mentioned this to Wynand Boshoff when I spoke about this very subject to him about a week or 2 weeks ago, that it was Thabo Mbeki who at one point said to the Afrikaner, well, show me the animal. And what we've seen thus far, 30 years later, and that's the point I'm trying to get to, is I myself, and in my discussions with many, many, many South Africans, many, many Afrikaners, I just simply, up till this point, have not been able to detect a kind of a real sense that there's a taste for it amongst the Afrikaans people themselves. I had this chat with your friend, Francois van der Merwe, the director of the Bitter Einders, about a week ago. And he ascribed it to the fact that Afrikaners are still economically doing pretty well in South Africa, that the squeeze is not, in terms of the economic survival of the Afrikaner, is not so much so that people are really saying, well, now it's time for us to really go our own way. Give me an idea of if you have to go and measure the temperature and express it in percentages to me, how many people would support your view of an Afrikaner homeland, do you think, amongst the Afrikaans people?
Well, generally, it's hard to put exact figures on the number.
It's just an indication. I'm just trying to get a taste for it. I'm just trying to get a feeling of, is this a real talk or is this not a real talk? I've not been able to cross that one yet, not in my discussions with Wynand Boshoff, not in my discussions with Francois, not in my discussions with many, even with Ernst Roots. I can't figure out for myself whether this is just kind of nonsense talk on what one would call, and I put it in inverted commas, the far right, or that there's a basis in which we say, well, okay, fine, here it is. These are the signs. People really are hoping, dreaming about this idea of independence in some form that manifests itself in a piece of land, a land of our own.
I think if I could just throw a number out there, the shock factor, 80%. And the reason why I say 80%, because when I speak to people on a day-to-day basis on the street, and even if they are, to some extent, liberal, libertarian, center-right, whatever the case may be, many of them believe in the idea of some form of autonomy. I think if we can just break away from the clutches of the ANC, because especially when I speak to business owners in particular and property owners, they fear the expropriation of their land. Business owners are struggling with having to keep up with BEE, and they want to just be free to employ who they can, who's the most efficient. So I could be completely wrong, but I throw a number 80% because the number of people I've spoken to, I have not had many valid counter arguments against it. I've had people that have told me it's a pipe dream, it won't happen in our lifetime. Even my own lawyer says it won't happen in my lifetime. But I mean, he's in the same boat as us. But we still need to keep at it. You know, if we just surrender this idea, then we will be eventually completely pushed out of this land. We'll be like Rhodesia. And I think if I can use as a fine example, a people that I have a lot of respect for who never surrendered is the Basque. The Basque people in Iberia. It was because of the Basque that the reconquest of Iberia happened inevitably. They had such a small number of men left, about 300 odd people, to fight against the caliphate with 100,000 plus. and they did not surrender because they refused, because they are a proud people. So if we have that mentality, that mindset, like think about in our own history, you have the Penkopper, who were literal children who fought in the Boer War, the Bittereinders, all the soldiers who kept on fighting, even though their wife and children had all died in concentration camps. They had nothing left to lose. Do we really have to allow ourselves to get to a point where we have nothing left to lose? Or are we willing to, while we still have a chance, while we still have some form of economic strength, to an extent, economic superiority, are we going to take this chance and push for this and have peace and prosperity? Or are we going to allow everything to collapse first into anarchy and suffering before we do anything?
Yeah.
We have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Peace or anarchy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I am going to keep on pushing because, and I'm going to keep on going back to what Thabo Mbeki told, I think Constantine for that matter, and the Vryheidsfront Plus at the time, is show me the people and show me the piece of land.
Mm.
And 30 years later, we talk about, I spoke to Bernard Boshoff, as I mentioned now, and he talked about Urana as a growth point. 3,000 people that live in Urana with, and I said this to Wynand as well, it appeals to me romantically as well, the idea of Urana, but is it a reality? So my question really is, 30 years later, it will appear to me that most white South Africans, and I would suggest for the sake of this discussion, a majority of Afrikaners seem to have accepted the reality of the unitary, multicultural, multiracial democracy in which we find ourselves. And there might be huge problems with that democratic order in our government in South Africa, corruption and failure of government, etc., and a great deal of hurtfulness. We've had enough of bad government, etc. But I just simply don't see numbers of people, or for that matter, I'm not even aware of a poll that suggests that maybe there's a majority of white Afrikaners who A, yearns for self-government, and B, would effectively do something to actually enable or empower or realize that.
Yeah, I understand your skepticism because generally speaking, that is the mainstream mindset. But the mainstream doesn't always
hold on. It's not a mainstream mindset. That's the reality. 30 years post-apartheid, we had 3,000 people that have moved to Urana. That's not significant. That means nothing. Couple of months ago, 2-3 months ago, we've got 49 South Africans, Afrikaners that became refugees in the United States of America.
Yeah.
It seems that, and not too long ago, I have people from, and I will call it by its name, News 24 journalist who I saw here in Amsterdam, who told me this is all just right-wing rubbish, and it's not to be taken seriously. So now I'm being close to being rude, and I don't mean to be that, but I'm really trying to figure out for myself, guys, is there really a sincere, a genuine case here? I think there's a case to be made. I think you make that case. I think Francois makes that case. I think Wynand Boshoff makes that case. But I don't see any, in practice, in reality, anything moving us closer to thinking that this could potentially become a reality.
Of course, things in the beginning take their time to form and shape. You know, over the last few years that I have been active as an activist, I've seen it go from just nothing to something a little bit more significant each and every day, each and every year. It slowly grows. And when for example, December, my last walk, the finish line was the Voortrekker Monument. I was there on Geloftedag. When I stood there with a 4-color flag, and I noticed in the crowds more Boere flags than the year before, and I speak to each and every person there, and there's a significant number of people that attend Geloftedag at the Voortrekker Monument. And although it is a few thousand and not a few million, it is a few thousand more than before.
Yeah.
It's few, even if 100, as I said to people in the past, even if I can influence 5 people to change their perception and move in this direction, I would have still succeeded because it's 5 more people than were before. So yes, maybe the mindset is now that it's a bunch of nonsense. And it's funny you mentioned about News 24. They're not to really be trusted. They try to mark me as as a racist for parading around with the full color at the Voortrekker Monument for the Stop Bella Bill protest. But the perception is slowly changing, and I think it's more so with the youth than the elderly. The elderly and the older generation are a little more pessimistic. My parents always question what I do, but I mean, parents are supposed to question their kids, keep tabs on what they're doing so they don't make a mistake and ruin their lives. But people are very pessimistic, but the youth is a growing number. More and more and more people slowly or gradually becoming disgruntled with the situation and calling for these things. We teach them, we allow them access to the information that they need to know that we are right now in a very advantageous position. So we'll see the change of the perception. I think after my walk, we're going to have a very strong change of perception. And the other thing to take note of is the earmarked Volkstaat area has about 1.6, 1.7 million Afrikaners. That's Afrikaans
Yeah.
speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And about, call it over 2 million whites overall, which accounts for roughly between 60 to 70% of the population in that set area.
Mhm.
So
Can we talk about that said area? I think that's also going to be the area that you're going to cover in this walk of yours. I went
yes,
onto Google. I will put the image on the screen here for viewers to see as well. If I understand it correctly, and I see what I see, it will appear to me that this Volkstaat that you're talking about is just about the entirety of Gauteng. Am I seeing it correct?
it's not. It for the most part actually excludes large portions of Gauteng. The only area that it includes is portions of Pretoria, portions of the East Rand and the West Rand,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then it is mostly the Western Transvaal and Eastern Transvaal, very sparsely populated areas with mostly farmland and so. But this
But
map
Liam,
focuses on areas in Gauteng where we are a majority.
yeah, yeah. I'm looking at the map right now. I'll put the map on the screen as well. The little colored sections, rainbow sections. I guess that's going to be
Uh,
where that's the walk, I would imagine. Um,
yeah,
and
that's the day to day.
yeah, but that includes Sandton, Johannesburg, Midrand, Randburg, Soweto, Carletonville, Pretoria. That's just the heart that I'm talking about. I mean, that's the economic heartland of South Africa. Um,
Yeah, those are excluded. If you look
yeah,
nicely at the map, then you'll see that Midrand, the whole of Joburg,
right, I get it.
Sandton,
So the
Soweto,
full, yeah.
it's excluded.
Okay,
We
so if we are to read that map, just help me so that people can actually understand the map as well. If you could explain it to us, the left-hand side is then one component, and let's say the right-hand side, in terms of the colors that you've used, those are the two components that then meet. Am I seeing
yes,
it correctly?
yeah. There's the two parts of the map, and they obviously but
It will
the
include Pretoria, but it will then exclude Midrand, Sandton, Johannesburg,
yeah.
and very, very much the heart that I was referring to.
Yeah, where when this map was drawn up, the focus was on areas where we are a majority and cutting out areas where other peoples are a majority. So as to that, we don't end up with conflicts because when you draw up maps, it's like think about the scramble for Africa. They just drew straight lines and didn't take account of demographics. We take account of demographics in these maps and look at fine to see, okay, what is the best case scenario? So if you look, for example, the N4 is pretty much like a border. So um, Brits being north of the N4 is part of it, but then everything else of the Botswana area is cut out. Likewise, by Pretoria, Mamelodi is cut out, and N4 continues as the border. Only thing north of the N4 is then the eastern side of Pretoria, that's that side, Silverton, and so on. So the map that I drew up on Google Maps is quite not 100% accurate, but there is the other map that you would have seen. That's the image on the Give Send Go that I sent out, and there is a little bit more detailed with the key maps, the key towns, and those towns and particular areas sit on the borders, so it gives you a rough idea of the area.
How did you, what is the map based on? What is the history of the map?
So this map actually comes out of the Afrikaner Accord negotiations.
Ah,
You see, and there is obviously some fine tuning that's happened over time, but there have been many people who have created maps, but this is by far arguably the most obtainable and realistic map in terms of the demographics.
is this document the 1994 accord that was signed by these people that I just spoke about, Mbeki and the likes? Is this a public document that we can all have access to, or that we should have access to?
Yes, it's publicly available. You can find it online. If you search the Afrikaner Accord, then you can find a copy of it online, and anyone can have access to it. It's there. It's publicly available. That's how I found it the first time, is when I started doing my research. Then I searched online, I found it, and as I also went through some of the references and started looking at our country's constitution and some of the points that facilitate for the accord. And I found it quite interesting, actually.
Well, what I find interesting is the fact that we've not discussed this, that this is not something that's part of a public discussion. And I want to quote a document I got from you. I think this is what you sent me. And this is your core message, in fact. 1994 historic referendum was held to establish a Volkstaat, a self-governing nation state for the Afrikaner-Boer people in South Africa. The outcome was overwhelmingly successful, and in accordance with Constitutional Act 30 of 1994, a Forkstart Council, Volkstaatsraad, was formed to facilitate negotiations through the Afrikaner Accord. Borders were drawn. This is what we're talking about now. Maps were submitted. That's what we're talking about now. And a final territory was, in fact, agreed upon. Everything was in place. I think this is something that you've written. All that remained was to table the agreement in Parliament for final approval. Tragically, due to betrayal within our own ranks, the proposal was never presented, leaving the dream of the Volkstaat suspended just one step away from realization. Is that accurate? Is that factual?
As accurate as to my knowledge, yes. As accurate and factual to my knowledge, based on the discussions that I've had with key players. So you can look, for example, Act 30 in 1994. You're welcome to Google search it and find it. Why would our constitution facilitate for a folk state council in our constitution if they did not want us to have some form of independence?
Yeah. Well, then I come back to the same point again, Liam. What surprises me is that why at least has, I would imagine, political parties, organization not campaigned to make this information more available to the public so that Oom Jan and Tant San knows what we're talking about. This sounds, if I read it, when I got this, I thought to myself, well, is this factual? Is this the way it was really penned down in history? And can we access this information? It astounds me that nobody has put this information out to the public.
So the answer to that is quite simple. It's not profitable. It's not profitable for certain ideas like this to be pushed. So the reason why I say that is there is within the Afrikaner circles and the elites certain individuals who place themselves there in order to enrich themselves, in order to fill their own pockets. And we know who they are. They know who they are. And they, particularly for the most part, come from the ranks of the Broederbond, that started as something good and changed into something that was terrible in the end. But there is, and anyone, people I've spoken to from all organizations have acknowledged to me, we'd love to push it forward. But certain key players who hold the top seats, who are gatekeepers, don't want it to happen because it's much easier to just do the bare minimum, looking like you're doing the most, taking the people's money, filling your pockets, profiting, and well, while you're putting on a facade that this is the limitations of what we can actually do. And then anyone who wants to really push the truth, trample them down, push them down, and prevent them and mark them as being these terrible far right, racist, terrorist individuals. And I speak from this out of experience because the people I fought against who removed me from my position as a councillor, who threw me out of a political party, tried to remove me from the scene, did exactly that to me because I had threatened their source of income by bringing the truth forward. It's very simple. Anyone with a brain can look at this and see exactly. It's always been about money. Look at the way the ANC behaves. Look at with the GNU. They never negotiated policy. They negotiated positions. Why? Put certain key players in those positions to earn a bigger salary, looking like they're doing a good job, but when they're actually doing the bare minimum. Except for maybe one or two. They actually are one or two guys that does a good job, but they are far and few. The majority are just there to earn a salary.
Should it not all start with some polling or some organization try to figure out, what's really going on in the minds of South Africans, how Afrikaners feel about the concept, the idea, the dream of a Volkstaat? That seems to be something that should be a feasible something to at least go and test the population.
I think it is a valid point to say let's do some polling because then you can really get a view on the perception of the people right now. But the question is now, which of the organizations or individuals with significant following are actually going to do that? Because once again, as I said, the most influential, it's not really favorable for them to do such a thing. It doesn't work in their agenda. They need to uphold a particular status quo for certain financial elites. Yeah. And this just doesn't fit in line with that frame of thinking. So we could dry push for it. Like, honestly, when I do my walk, it's something we'll put up. We'll say, let's do a poll, but we need to garner attention to it so that we can have an accurate poll that is not flawed and influenced by organizations with sinister intentions.
But at the end of the day, there is still this big question, and the big question of this very, very tiny minority of European South Africans, white South Africans, Afrikaner South Africans at the most southern tip of Africa. And I think I mentioned this to Francois the other day. When I was born in 1957, that makes me 68 years old now, I think the black population in South Africa was something like 9 million. When I matriculated, I think it shot up to something like 34 million. By the time we hit the end of apartheid and post-apartheid, it shot up to something like 60 million. And research will show you, the indicators are there, that I think by 2058, we will reach a number of 100 million population in South Africa, of which literally 4% would be white, and I think 2.1% would be Afrikaans. That does make us rather insignificant at the end of the day. So having said that, I want to talk to you about yourself and your own political evolution, and keep in mind what I just said now. What does an Englishman, Irish English South African, do running around with the old Transval flag? That's how did it get to that is what I want to find out.
Sometimes I wonder myself, how did I go from being borderline liberal to absolute staunch conservative. I don't know. Well, actually, the long and the short of it is, over time, my perception, I grew up in Cape Town. So Cape Town is a very different sense of people. And there, I actually, as a kid, hated the Afrikaner because the Cape Afrikaner are very different to the Free State and the Transvaal.
Mm.
But my best friends in school are all Afrikaans, and actually, one of my best friends, Reinhard, he's is from Southwest Africa, so completely different breed of people,
Yeah.
and I think the warm hospitality of the culture really drew me, but the history and all of that, and I started coming to a point of realization, like acknowledging as I research more history, acknowledging, okay, and my Irish side, my Irish roots. The Irish came into South Africa during the Boer War to fight in the war on the side of the Transvaal. So justifiably, I already know what team I'm in. And the more I research in history and the more I see about like my own personal family lineage in this country, the more it made me pick the side of the Transvaal. My mother, for example, so my mother's side is a mix of Scottish, Welsh, Cornish, and somewhere along the line there's some Flemish and some Russian from St. Petersburg. But my mother's great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, came to South Africa as a geologist in the 1800s. He worked for the Transvaal government. His home was on Church Street, across the road from Paul Kruger's house. Our
Mhm.
family had personal relations with Paul Kruger and his wife, Gesina, and his children. So my great grandmother grew up with Paul Kruger's children. And on my mother's side of the family, they actually tore up their British passports and said, "This is our home. We refuse to go back." So we had already proclaimed that this is our homeland. This is where we belong. And in doing that, there's always, when you choose a country to live in as an outsider, you need to assimilate. And I think because of the ills of the past, the English and the Afrikaans never really assimilated into one. And I look at the behavior, generally, the behavior and the lack of culture of the youth of the English-speaking populations of South Africa. And it is this very westernized degeneracy that I just can't agree with. I
Yeah.
cannot, being someone who grew up in a very traditional Christian household, and I see just the absolute respect and integrity of the Boer specifically, and the honoring of history, the respect of traditions, the old-fashioned values, and just that passion for their culture and their history. And I mean, I'm part of that history. My family is part of that history. So it just made sense for me to just to an extent fully assimilate.
Liam, I'm going to ask a question that's going to be a little bit ironic because I've listened to you now. I hear what you say. Isn't it then hurtful to you as a white, you're an English, Irish South African, but with great passion and love for the Boer people, that because we're drawing borders, which is what is proposed in any case with the idea of a Volkstaat, you're not allowed to or will not be able to get permission to live in Urania.
Well, Urania, I mean, I know the people there, and I asked once before, like I think I asked Karel Boshoff. I know his best friend quite well, and I asked, would I be allowed to live there? Yeah, sure, fine. I could live there, but if we
But you
achieve
get
a
my
full,
point, though, Liam.
yeah,
My point is about drawing borders.
yeah.
And because
Look,
we draw those borders, we exclude certain people. And that's a very painful something to be excluded. So that's part of I think the difficulty of all of this.
Of of course, I mean it's a very obviously a very difficult thing, and for some to think about this divide, and I mean it's obviously not an absolute disaster. We still have freedom of movement across borders, but yeah, look, Orania in its own is basically it's almost fully autonomous enclave. So the following steps after the achievement of a Volkstaat is the inclusion of cultural enclaves, at a later stage. We have down at very close to Garies in the Western Cape, there's a town by the name of Groendorp that sits on the Groenrivier. There's Iriaka, there's Urania, there's a couple of other places scattered across the country that I've never heard of or never been to. I know that there's friends of mine trying to put together an enclave in near Port Elizabeth. So there will always be little scattered territories, but in the long term, they too can stand with the Volkstaat and be a distant territory involved, even if they're autonomous. But so it sounds sad initially, as you put it, the dividing, but that gives reason to further unite.
I want to ask you one or two more questions. You're born post the arrival of Nelson Mandela. You're born free, I think, is the term that's used in South Africa. We are now 30 years into this democracy. The country is falling to pieces. The future seems enormously uncertain, and you are going to do this walk to make people aware of 235 and in fact state that, and that's what you stated in this discussion.
The Afrikaner Accord. Afrikaner
Yeah,
Accord.
the Afrikaner.
235 is just an article. It means nothing without the accord and any other supporting documents.
One or two questions about the Afrikaner today. I just mentioned you now the demographic explosion in South Africa, the curve, how it and where it is going. And if you really then have a helicopter view and you look at it all, then the presence of white people in South Africa becomes almost washed out of the picture. I want to talk to you about where we are, where you think Afrikaners are today. But the first question I want to ask you is whether you think that white South Africans, and we have all collectively been found guilty of apartheid, whether we have 30 years post-apartheid still today a moral responsibility towards our black brothers and sisters.
No, absolutely not. Why should I pay for the sins of the actions of a less than 0.5% of political elites? A decision made by a small collective in a shady organization in backroom meetings who decided to set up a systematic system of whatever they wanted to achieve, and as what it was perceived of by the world, who were the ones who were the reasons for the conflicts. That is a small. The numbers is literally less than 0.05% of the entire population that was actively involved in the systems of apartheid. So why should the large majority be blamed for the
just specifically about that, the answer would probably be because large majority have kept on voting, obviously, the national. This is an argument I had with, in fact, I had this discussion with Pik Botha many years ago, who very angrily told me that it was my father, our fathers and our mothers who voted for the National Party and who actually demanded tougher sanctions, not the right word, but tougher control over the black population of South Africa. So he found exactly we were responsible for the system that well, they might have executed, but we created that system.
But on the same hand, you can ask and say, like, okay, should the ANC be entirely removed from power and there's an alternative government that comes in? Is it then justified to then blame all blacks in South Africa for the ill doings of the ANC because
Mhm.
they voted for the ANC? It's the same question. It's not justified to blame the masses. Many of them just vote because they're told to vote, and many people just follow because of it's the populists, they find this person popular, and it, in politics, like especially when it comes to elections, many people are not they don't do deep research into some of the political parties and the people. So they just go with what they feel works.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's like let's look at the DA, for example. At their core, they are as terrible as everybody. In fact, every political party in South Africa is terrible. But how can you blame their supporters for their ill doings? Their
yeah,
supporters are fooled. They were fooled by the political parties and the systems. So
yeah, yeah. Leon, just very quickly, one or two very short questions. Who do you think protects the rights of the Afrikaner in South Africa in terms of political parties? Where should my vote go to?
I don't vote anymore. I'm anti-democratic. There is no political party that stands for the Afrikaner. There is no political party that respects the Boer. There is no political party that respects this flag anymore. There is none that can stand for us. The political systems have failed us entirely.
All
And
right, and
remember, I worked for the one and only party that on pen and paper said that they were an Afrikaner party, but they do everything contrary to Afrikaner culture.
Vryheidsfront Plus, Freedom Front Plus is
Yes.
who you're referring to here. Last question. Do you believe today, 30 years after apartheid, that we, the Afrikaner people, and this is a nasty question, that we have become disempowered, neutered, I think was the word Francois used, castrated, that we are politically marginalized, oppressed, subjugated, voiceless?
I think systematically we are marginalized. I mean, look at BEE and all of that. We have almost no way of achieving any government positions without doing dodgy deals with cronies in the background, like those that are, and those that have morals just continue economically. But as we all know, economically, the Boer Afrikaner is still quite strong, quite independent, and so there is a balance. We might not have control of the government, but we still hold significant control of the economy, and we are still a significant, if not actually, we are the majority contributor towards the tax base. So there is a balance, but yes, we have been marginalized in some areas.
Last question, or not question, it's actually a request. Just give us an idea. Tell me more about when your walk is going to start. Where does it start? And give us an idea of the route that you're going to do. And we're going to close with that.
All right, so our starting point is the Voortrekker Monument because it is quite a significant symbol to our culture. And I know some people will have the argument, yes, but the place was built by the Broederbond. Yes, it was, but you can't blame a building for the actions of an organization. It seems people just want to put blame to something that inanimate as well. But it is the center point. It is a point where my first walk I started from there. My second walk I finished there. This in my two parts I will start and finish there, respectively. But the route that we will take, and obviously you've got the map, it's basically the border towns wrapping round of the proposed Volkstaat area, going to the west first, Brits, Rustenburg, Costa, Ventersdorp, down to Klerksdorp and Orkney, where my father grew up, and Potchefstroom, a very, very significant. Now, the significance of Potchefstroom is that was the first capital of the Transvaal, and it was the first place where the four-color flag was raised and put into use. So there we were hoping to do something big, and then we make our ways to a little bit in the Free State, Parijs, Sasolburg, up to Van der Bijl Park, Meyerton, Voggewil, Carltonville, up to Creersdorp, Rodepoort, and then through Verwoerdsburg, now known as Centurion, and to the to back to the Voortrekker Monument. On the eastern half, we go through Silverton and straight down the N4, basically to Witbank, Middelburg, make our way straight down to Ermelo, to Volksrus, to Mayuba, where we'll obviously be for Mayuba Feast. A lovely time of the year, such a great place to be. Fantastic people. And from Mayuba, we make our way then back up to Secunda and then through to the East Rand. And then we go through the three Bs, or as some people say, the Bermuda Triangle, Boksburg, Brakpan, Benoni. You know that you gotta love those people, but the jokes coming out of there. And I'm hoping to see those.
Just tell me again. What did you say they are? What the Bermuda? What did you say?
The Bermuda Triangle.
The Bermuda Triangle. Best
And
one
I,
I've
I
time.
I believe I saw that on an Arrive Alive post. So
Uh-huh.
Arrive Alive, which is like the road safety
Yeah,
corporation in South Africa, they posted that. Um, but then Kempton Park and East Pretoria East and back to the Voortrekker Monument. So it's an immense journey. It will certainly be more than 1,500 kilometers. The estimate is 1,500 kilometers on the general route, but you've always got the little turns and here and there. So what I'll do, like I've done on the last journeys, is I've got my fitness app on my phone, and I'll just every day take a screenshot of the total distance walked and tally it up at the end of the walk and see how much I actually did. But it is an immense journey. I am very excited for it. All the areas that I am going to, I have driven all those areas. I've been to every single one of those towns, and each of them have their own unique beauty, and
yeah.
it's just to see it on foot will be for me just so phenomenal. This country really is still beautiful despite all the troubles we have.
Yeah, Liam, just for us to get, and that's really the last question, just to get a kind of a picture of it all. I find it all a fantastic adventure. I must tell you that. I think we're gonna follow it. I'm gonna follow this. What do I see? It's literally you with your, I would imagine, good walking shoes on, walking with the old flag.
Yeah, yeah,
I think we'll put
walking
a
with.
picture on the screen so people can get an impression. And you're going to walk that distance every step, every single step by step, roughly 1,500 kilometers.
Yeah, step by step, we have our support vehicle carrying, extra backup and water supplies and that. But all I have with me is my shoes, my backpack with my camel pack, and my flag, and I motor forward. And I should have actually dug out my old shoes to show you what they actually looked like from the last two walks done through. So I haven't bought new tackies yet because, well, I don't think they'll survive that on the one hand. And on the second hand, since I no longer have the job as a councillor, I am very broke, to be honest. So I've got a pair of combat boots, and I hope they last. Otherwise, I'll have a pair of backups for the journey.
And that'll be your long walk to freedom. Liam Richard May, thank you very much for this chat.
Thank you.